If you go so far to spend so much energy to just dehumanize the Russians to such an extent, like you see it on Twitter and acts like they're orcs, they're not even humans. Make them subhuman and say that and celebrate their death of civilians, of children, of women, and you see the same thing with the Israelis have been doing for such a long time, just dehumanizing the Palestinians, saying that they're just evil people, they don't have a right to live, they're subhuman, they're animals. They just use that language. If you adopt that position, it will come back and bite you because becomes indefensible. You can't hold that narrative forever. You can't just reduce a whole group of people, a population, to subhuman status and think that that will fly. Like it's amazing how long it has.
Yeah,
flown.
well, that's what I was going to say. It's kind of disturbing.
But inevitably, I think you adopt that position, it will destroy you. Is there any?
Yeah, well, it will destroy you. I'm not quite sure exactly how. Because I was just thinking, when I was listening to for Amsterdam talk about, his experiences, firsthand experiences, and in Ukraine. It's something that we're aware of. We've talked about. There really is. I think it's almost fair to say a totalitarian regime now. Calling Zelensky a dictator is not a stretch by by any measure. I actually, there are a lot of dictators that I would rather live under, rather than Zelensky. But these things have been going on for a long time. It began, actually well before the launch of the SMO or the invasion, whatever you want to call it. And in general, there's just been a deliberate choice on the part of European leaders and the European media to look the other way. And it's now like it's just become extreme. Again, as Bob Amsterdam pointed out, this is something like the actual banning of a church. This is something that hasn't happened in Europe, since the 40s. World War II early. Right.
Nazi Germany, right.
Right. It really, and the fact that it's happening and that there's not a peep of protest. He's talked about how he's tried to like speak at religious liberty conferences, and he's denied a platform, and instead you have people that are actually actively involved in the persecution are given allowed to hide under the banner of religious liberty. Everything is turned upside down. But the thing is, these people are complicit in all this, just like so many of them are complicit in the genocide. Some people really don't know; they've been fooled, and they've been too trusting of certain media outlets, and they just don't know what's going on. So, but there are clearly people that know. And I know Bob Amsterdam pointed out, like he knew what was it? Certain reporters and whatever who just knew, and then just said, "Oh, I can't talk about this." Just killed the story, went on with some anti-Russian narrative. That's what's happening. It's been a conscious choice. There are people, a lot of people, again, powerful people, well-connected people in Europe and the U.S. that have been complicit in these horrors, whether we're talking about Ukraine or we're talking about Gaza. And that's kind of scary. You hope, by shining a light on it that, this whole spread of these ideas or, their complicity is going to be exposed. People will react with horror, and maybe that's what will happen. That's kind of what you're suggesting. I hope. But then my other worry is that we're, again, that we are seeing, a very disturbing kind of union between, some sort of version of woke liberalism, 21st century wokeism, and this ultra nationalism, and because we are actually seeing it. You find it in places like Ukraine, and that's where it's being brought together. It just seems like it's impossible. You suggest this 20 years ago, but it is happening, and it's this. Hopefully, it's just it's such an awful sort of um, monstrous hybrid that is kind of being formed here, that people will see it and it'll be the end. That's what I hope. But then there's this fear that it's going to grow. They, but anyway, what Trump is doing, with regard to the Ukraine. Earlier we were talking about the need to change the narrative. You just have to, because that's really what the narrative in the postmodern, world that we live in really shapes reality. So if you don't go after it, like you can negotiate a treaty like the JCPOA, but you didn't change the narrative. The Iranians are still evil. So it's just very easy to reimpose, to the sanctions and tear up the treaty. And the same thing could be said, we were saying, for Ukraine. But the narrative has taken a real beating in the last few days. It's not quite the way that I hope, we talked about things that they can point out. But some of it is like the corruption, right? Um, and he did call him a dictator. I think they need to go farther, because they've linked all of it to the failure, of Kiev to hold elections. I think that's actually kind of a minor point. The main thing is what we're talking about: the banning of the main church, the press gangs on the streets, the banning of all the political parties. That this actually, again, these things began, not the press gangs, but the banning of political parties in opposition or critical or independent media outlets. That began well before the SMO. And it's been going on, and that's really what makes Ukraine a scary place. And it's all, in the end, like at least there was some sort of ideological justification. But now it's really just become about Zelensky and his gang, because it's not that he's got rid of all these people that were maybe for negotiations with Russia or these leftist parties. Okay, he's got rid of all of them, and it was just the Maidan parties and other Maidan politicians like Poroshenko. But now he's going after them. He's actually part of his same, movement, you can say, but they're not on the Zelensky team. It really has become a dictatorship, that wields tremendous power and terrorizes its own citizens, as we can see from videos every day. So anyway, calling him a dictator is great. I think like with Trump, things are personal. So he really, I think part of that's what's going on too. It's just Zelensky, like you were saying, or I've heard other people say, he's built up as this Churchillian figure. And the whole thing was absurd. It was just sort of like Joe Biden being sharp as a tack, or a lot of the nonsense that was spoken about Kamala Harris. And I think this is another case. It's just like, again, where you had the establishment media circling the wagons, right? In this case, around Zelensky, who was always really a very flawed person. He was not Churchillian, in any sense of the word. He was, an ex-comedian who really lacked some very basic, diplomatic and leadership skills. You could see that. I mean, he seemed to think that he could. He's offended a lot of world leaders. I've heard stories about, how was very disrespectful towards Lula, the president of Brazil, or Modi, the president of India. And I think it's probably well known that he's really a rather unpleasant character. But, we had to hide that. Just like we had to hide facts about Biden or Kamala Harris. And, it was our duty, any criticism was a Russian talking point. But we kind of see the breakdown of this particular personality cult created by the media, just like we saw the breakdown of some other ones. In retrospect, you go back and say, maybe like the first crack in the edifice of the establishment media was Joe Biden. Like they had gone all out to pretend the guy was the sharpest attack and everything, and then the thing blew up in their faces, and they had to admit it. And so now it's kind of happening with Zelensky. Like, this guy is, he's the new Churchill, and then you see, this guy's an idiot. Like, anybody who stop and say, okay, even if you think that Trump was wrong to say what he said, that look, you're the president of a country that's just utterly dependent on U.S. largesse, U.S. support. It seems like anybody with just a bit of common sense. You don't have to be some sort of political wizard. You just don't insult the guy on whom you depend. You don't bite the hand that feeds you.
Well, what do you think is going to be the fallout of all this? Because as these European leaders double down behind Zelensky and they say, like you said, he's this Churchillian figure, and they keep on doubling down on this completely false narrative. And as the truth comes out that not only is he not Churchill, he's actually quite a monstrous character that has been terrorizing his population, that has violated all basic human rights laws, has, suppressed all opposition parties, and it's just absolutely horrific, and just destroyed the country. What do you think is going to happen to all these people, these countries, and these people that have just kept on fueling this narrative that yes, this is Zelensky, cover of Time magazine, he's the great hero, and then we find out that it just becomes undeniable that it's all a lie as more and more truth comes out. As we're starting to see happen, the dam is breaking with this narrative, and instead of saying like, oh man, yeah, there's some things that are questionable, they can at least say that like he's not perfect. There's some things that we agree. They don't even do that. They just we got to turn on all the spin machines. BBC News immediately sending their fact-checking team out to say, no, it's not true. He's not a dictator. He's actually a great guy. People are just like, come on, guys. Meet us halfway at least.
Yeah, or do some honest reporting, right? Yeah.
Right. So what is going to be the fallout for Europe, for everything? I think, how is this going to...
Yeah. Well, it is another blow to the narrative, to the establishment. It clearly is, because I don't think Zelensky's days are numbered. It seems clear to me. I don't see how he can survive this. The only reason that he could get away with all this, of course, is that he had the unquestioning support of the West, and I think it just puffed up his pride to the point where he thought he could get away with anything. He was in the habit of insulting Western leaders, and he just always got away with it. Sometimes there's a little bit of pushback. I think he called it wasn't him. Okay, it was a previous foreign minister. Called I think Olaf Scholz did like liverwurst or something along those lines. It just you don't do that especially if you're a foreign minister. But the Ukrainians do. And Zelensky above all. But they could get away with it because they were just so important for the narrative. So that he could, this ugly side could always be suppressed or spun or whatever. But eventually, as we've seen in the case of Biden, in his dementia, you just can't hide the reality forever. What I've heard is that actually, Trump and a lot of people on his team have really, even before they came to power, there was they pretty much formed a consensus that this guy is he's just a pain in the what, and be good for him to go. And then you saw that he was even like, it wasn't stated openly, he's still always praised in the media, but remember, like his first address to the Congress, there was all these standing ovations and everything. The second time he came, nobody really wanted to talk to him. They said, oh yeah, he's a great guy, but I have something else to do. So there was always already the sense, I think there are two things going on, is that, yeah, he's not such a great guy. And then, just looking at the person. But the other thing is, hey, he's not going to win this war. He's losing it. And I don't really want to tie myself to a losing cause. So, both of those things are happening, and they're going to, I don't think he's going to last much longer.
Yeah, I heard that I saw this morning that the U.S. is stopping all arms sales to Ukraine. So if that's the case, I don't know how much is already kind of in the pipeline that's still going through.
Yeah,
but,
I'm not clear about that. I think that was a report from a member of the Rada in Ukraine.
Right.
So it may be true, but I don't know. We'll have to see if that's confirmed. But I think there's a good chance. Again, I think we've always said that there's a better chance that the U.S. will just walk away. This will make it easier because now there are a lot, there's so many people, Trump supporters, who never had a real strong opinion about Zelensky, but probably pretty much agreed, oh, yeah, great guy, whatever. And now that he's got in this fight and he's insulted Trump, that's it. There's a huge
You don't
part
do
of
that if you want to win over the MAGA crowd. You don't want to.
Well, right. So, so now it just makes it much easier for, still going to be somewhat difficult, especially if depends on how far the Russians go. If they start going, they cross the Dnieper and so on. We've talked about all that. It could be really hard, but it's certainly strengthened his position vis-a-vis Ukraine. Trump's position is going to make it easier for him to walk away from this. It's good news as far as that goes.
Guys, thanks for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you haven't checked it out yet, please check out my website, nobliski.io. You can look at the pinned comment below. It's something that I think you'll find useful. Even my dad uses it. My wife uses it. Instead of Googling things, you should be using this website because you get access to OpenAI, Perplexity, Anthropic, DeepSeek. There's hundreds of models that you can use. It's what I use to create the thumbnail images, things like this. And the greatest thing about it is there's no rate limits. There are no subscription fees. It's free to try out and use. You get free tokens every day. So if you're not a heavy AI user, you will never have to pay for anything. But this is really my passion project. I really want to get it off the ground, and I think you guys would like it. So yeah, check it out. Let me know what you think. And if you have time to download the apps and give it 5 stars, that'd mean a lot to me as well. Thanks a lot.